In July 1967, 3 police officers watched a circular UFO with an orange glow around it perform extraordinary maneuvers over the New Forest in southern England. On December 21st, 1978, Captains Vern Powell and John Randall were flying from Blenheim to Christchurch in New Zealand when they witnessed several radar and visual sightings of unidentified lights in the sky. Several days later, a film crew sent up to investigate actually filmed 12 seconds of footage of similar unexplained lights, which also registered on ground radar. These reports could hardly be made up. But where do UFOs come from? Other planets and other solar systems? From inside the Earth? From the future? Or from the deepest recesses of our minds? There are almost as many different views as there are descriptions of aliens and their craft. One of the world's leading experts on aerodynamics, Dr. Maurice Biot, believes
the least improbable explanation is that these things are artificial and controlled. My opinion for some time has been that they have an extraterrestrial origin.
One of the most striking aspects of UFO sightings is their extraordinary variety. Sometimes people seem to have been attacked by lasers from alien craft. At other times, the lights seem to have a healing effect. Sometimes witnesses are politely waved to by the occupants of flying saucers. Others are chased and besieged in their homes. Some people are told that they have been chosen to save the world from destruction. Others are captured and subjected to mysterious examinations. And reported craft come in a bewildering variety of forms: disc-like, triangular or spherical, huge or tiny, cigar-shaped, with wings or without. The aliens themselves? They may be beautiful or hideous, giants or dwarf-like, able to communicate using language, others seemingly unable to communicate at all. The most common type is known as the gray, around 3 feet tall with an oversized head and large eyes with no visible pupil. Grays are humanoid, but can also resemble reptiles and insects. An explanation for the huge variety in reported sightings is that witnesses are notoriously bad at recalling what they've seen. In one test on live TV, a researcher showed members of the audience a faked picture of a flying saucer for 15 seconds, then asked them to draw it. Of the 60 resulting drawings, barely 2 matched. Other experiments have indicated how open to suggestion people can be, especially under hypnosis. It is also significant that descriptions of UFOs go in and out of fashion, and that images used in films seem to be later recalled by witnesses as if they were factual. But if UFOs can be explained as just figments of the imagination, and there are many other scientific explanations, it is of little help to those who are convinced they have actually seen them. Mike Sachs spoke for thousands, perhaps millions of other witnesses after his sighting in May 1979.
Yeah, if only I could make you believe what I saw. It was there. I know it. UFOs are real, solid physical craft. It's just terrible knowing this and being unable to prove it.
have they been visiting our planet? Some experts believe that the origins of the human race itself can be traced back to visitors from the stars. Ancient cave paintings, stories from the Bible, and epic Indian poetry seem to suggest that UFOs are not a new phenomenon. If this is so, the occupants of these craft don't appear to have learned very much over the intervening centuries. Why are they still doing the same things today that they apparently did thousands of years ago, appearing to individuals, giving messages and performing strange experiments on human beings? One exciting suggestion is that UFOs do not in fact come from other planets, but from our own future. If UFOs can travel through time, they may be sampling different time zones for study. Their appearances on Earth could be thousands of years apart to us, but in their time, the missions might be separated by only a few days. UFOs and aliens may not have changed much over the centuries, but the way we relate to them has changed a great deal. Before the invention of the first airplanes, people described UFOs as flying boats or balls of fire. The great airship flap of the 1890s in the USA came at a time when the public were just becoming aware of the first man-made airships. In Europe in the 1930s, a spate of ghost rockets was reported. And during World War II, strange lights seen around aircraft were given the name Foo Fighters. Do UFOs actually change according to our current understanding? Maybe this variety is another pointer to the inaccuracy of witnesses' perceptions and reports. In any event, it might be thought that of all people, astronomers would be the most likely to come up with a rational explanation for UFOs in terms of what we already know about space. In 1957, however, Dr. Frank Halstead of Darling Observatory, Minnesota, made a remarkable statement.
Many professional astronomers are convinced that saucers are interplanetary machines.
The start of the Cold War between East and West after World War II coincided with a significant increase in UFO sightings. The idea of being invaded by aliens was seen by some as a thrilling possibility, but by most as a nightmare. For science fiction writers and filmmakers, space aliens provided a great storyline. And in turn, their inventions influenced people's reports of sightings. Interest in UFOs was also fueled by the atomic weapons program, the space race, and high-profile reports of abductions. Strangely, one of the most powerful factors has been government itself, and the apparent inability of the U.S. government in particular to come to terms with the public's concerns. As a reaction against the official wall of silence, over the last 50 years, a number of independent organizations have been established to discover, once and for all, the truth about UFOs. Thousands of people throughout the world have seen things they didn't understand in the sky and have felt compelled to share their story. But how much of their accounts come from the imagination? Many of the best reports are from people who you would expect to have good observational powers, like pilots and police officers. It was an American pilot, Kenneth Arnold, whose sighting in 1947 sparked off modern interest in UFOs. His description of what he saw first gave rise to the term flying saucer. Since then, UFOs have also been detected by radar on dozens of occasions. In the late 80s, the Belgian Air Force investigated many radar and visual reports, often launching jets to try and actively intercept any alien craft. The pilots related some extraordinary sightings, including over 700 reports of a triangular object that some believed may have actually been a new secret aircraft. On March 1st, 1973, 40 brightly lit circular objects were reported over Sailors Lake, Pennsylvania. A group of a dozen people watched the objects for 2 hours. This was the beginning of a sensational period of UFO history, involving many dramatic sightings of what are known as clusters, group sightings of UFOs. By late summer 1973, some of the most important sightings had appeared in a huge swathe inland from New York, across to the Great Lakes, and down to the Gulf of Mexico. 7 of these cases arose in a period of just 19 days. Interestingly, there had been similar clusters in Washington, D.C. in 1952 and near Bristol, England in the 1960s. The recurrence of similar UFOs in the same place, months or even years apart, supports the theory that UFOs travel through time. For the occupants of the craft, only a few seconds may elapse, while for us on planet Earth, the sightings may be separated by many years. Photographs taken by Ed Walters at Gulf Breeze, Florida, are some of the most remarkable in the whole field of UFO investigation. They supposedly show objects he had sighted many times. Between November 1987 and May 1988, Walters took over 50 Polaroid and stereoscopic photographs as well as video recordings. One object kept appearing again and again. At other times, several objects appeared together. Other observers claimed to have seen objects too. To rule out fraud, the Mutual UFO Network gave him a 3-dimensional sealed camera to use. Photographs of UFOs ought to provide strong evidence of their existence, but the authenticity of most pictures is doubted at some time. And it's not only photographers who can play tricks. Sometimes our own eyes can deceive us. Advanced techniques are now used not just to investigate UFOs, but also to understand why we may imagine we've seen them. UFOs arrive without warning, but don't always leave without trace. Close encounters of the second kind refers to cases where UFOs have left visible marks on the ground after a reported or presumed sighting. On November 9, 1979, a Scottish forester named Robert Taylor came face to face with a dome-shaped object hovering silently just above the ground. Two spiky objects grabbed his legs, and he lost consciousness. When he recovered, the object had vanished, leaving two parallel tracks about 9 feet long, studded with holes. The most crucial evidence must be actual wreckages of UFOs that have crashed. The most famous report being the incident said to have occurred at Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. Despite the many rumors that such wreckages have been retrieved, none are yet proven beyond doubt. UFOs can sometimes have devastating effects. They can interfere with cars and aircraft controls and wreak havoc with power supplies. One UFO in 1965 is said to have caused blackouts in 6 US states and across parts of Canada. On other occasions, dead and mutilated bodies of animals have been found after UFO sightings. But probably the most destructive effects of UFOs are psychological and personal. After a sighting, many witnesses find that everyday reality no longer has any meaning. They lose their jobs and their marriages break down, their partner unable to believe that they are telling the truth. Some UFO witnesses become celebrities, hyped by the media, while others become publicly ridiculed. There is even a story of a police chief in Alabama who had his house burnt down by neighbors unable to cope with his report and photograph of an alien encounter. With the destructive power UFOs appear to have, it isn't surprising that governments around the world should be worried about them. In the words of Air Commodore J. Salatin of Indonesia,
"The study of UFOs is a necessity for the sake of world security. In the event, we have to prepare for the worst in the space age, irrespective of whether we become the Columbus or the Indians."
government officials in France, Spain, and Brazil have encouraged more openness about UFOs than in the United States. In the US, Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter gave support to advocates of UFO research before they reached the White House. Yet the history of the US government and UFOs seems to have been characterized by cover-ups and evasion. Do UFOs really deserve to be investigated seriously? Many reported sightings probably have mundane explanations, but there are still thousands of cases that cannot be dismissed so easily. Unfortunately, some people who claim to have strong evidence, such as film of the wreckage of the UFO near Roswell, New Mexico, weaken their case by refusing to release it for detailed scientific analysis. Close encounters of the third kind. This is the term ufologists use to describe actual contact with alien beings. Over the years, there have been literally thousands of reports of such encounters, each one unique and seemingly unconnected. The first man to claim direct contact with aliens was George Adamski in the California desert in 1952. He related how the handsome alien he met took him on a magical tour of the solar system and introduced him to inhabitants of Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter. Such a glamorous and exciting story inspired many of the UFO UFO cults which arose over the next decade. Their members often believed that they were specially chosen to lead the human race, or at least had been selected to channel important messages from our cosmic masters. Yet most aliens, it seems, do not come to Earth to deliver messages. More often their missions are a mystery, as in the case of the two humanoid beings who asked a farmer in New Mexico for a bag of fertilizer, then vanished when he went to fetch it. It's remarkable that aliens should be seen at all, but it's the huge variety of their appearances that is even more astonishing. For a long time, there was almost no similarity between the descriptions given. Only recently have there been regularly reported types, the most common now being known as the gray. According to scientists, it is illogical to imagine that extraterrestrial life forms would resemble us in any way. Yet humanoids are reported much more often than non-humanoid forms. During a contact at Bait Bridge in Zimbabwe, a witness was told, "They can make themselves appear in any form in our minds." Does this explain the appearance of the ominous men in black, who look similar to humans, but who seem to have a mechanical power source? And is there a link between today's stories about aliens and the claims of contact with fairies in earlier centuries? It is through the eyes of witnesses that we perceive UFOs and aliens. To understand the claims, we must understand the claimants themselves. Should we believe repeater witnesses, people who claim to have had successive encounters? What about people who claim that they are themselves aliens? And do children make less or more reliable witnesses than adults? Few encounters with aliens are as magical as the experience originally described by George Adamski. Often they have unpleasant effects on the bodies and minds of the witnesses, who can later exhibit strange neuroses and compulsions. It is not really surprising that an encounter with aliens should produce drastic changes in people. But researchers should consider carefully the opposing possibility, that changes in people have brought on the encounter. Of all the aspects of UFO phenomena, abductions are the most terrifying, and yet the most exciting. Betty and Barney Hill, a couple from New Hampshire, were the first to report the classic type of abduction. It took them over 2 years to piece together what happened on the night of September 19, 1961. Over 30 years later, investigators and psychologists are still arguing about it. Did the hypnosis that they underwent bring out real memories, or was it personal fear translated into fiction? The Hills case was the first to be properly publicized, sparking off hundreds of similar reports and launching the subject of abductions as a serious aspect of UFO research. Many of these stories have been subjected to the closest scientific scrutiny. On October 12, 1973, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker reported that they had been abducted by 3 entities who appeared from a large oval craft. Dr. Bernard Best of Harper Hospital, Detroit, examined the abductees. He concluded that they were both honest people, truthfully relating their story. There was nothing about either of them that suggested falsehood, fantasy, or delusion. Most abductees do not use their story to draw attention to themselves. Indeed, many find it difficult afterwards to remember what happened at all. Some researchers believe that often abductees fail to recognize their experiences because they are protected by a new image implanted by the aliens. The deeper truth emerges only when abductees notice that they have inexplicable wounds on their body or realize that a substantial period of time cannot be accounted for. Under regression hypnosis, details about a physical abduction can emerge. But is this really the most important aspect of an encounter? Many abductees believe that their experiences are primarily spiritual encounters rather than physical ones, and that there is special purpose in their particular selection. Some abductees go on to develop extraordinary artistic talents. Others discover spiritual powers that they could not have imagined previously. Many abduction accounts are surprisingly similar. Two common scenarios are the lonely road at night and the bedroom visitation. These are presumably the times and places that people are most vulnerable and most easily abducted. But there is evidence that such encounters do not occur completely out of the blue. French researcher Jean-François Bodec introduced the concept of a build-up phase. He suggested that for hours or weeks before an abduction, witnesses act out of character and break normal habits. They are driven to isolate themselves, somehow facilitating the abduction. This all leaves one crucial question. What do aliens want? The leading theory is that they are studying human genetics. The human race may be a biological experiment which the aliens are monitoring and updating. Alternatively, the aliens may require something from humans which is absent in their own genetic makeup. Is this plausible? Or is the whole phenomenon of abductions part of a complex, self-induced fantasy?